Hey YouTube, this is PokéCastXVll here, and today we'll be recapping the top 8 decks to make cut at this year's US National Championships. Unlike the national event that I attended along with a lot more that took place, Trump Card was banned, meaning that a lot of players around the globe were particularly excited for this year's event to see what decks would excel in this current format, especially players like myself who are intending on going to the World Championships later this year. If you would like to see the website with all the players' names, including the deck list that they used, all you have to do is click on the link in the description box below. And so I'll be breaking down the individual decks and explaining the main concepts, as well as providing you with a deck list so that if you would like to test a deck yourself, then you at least have the foundation to build upon. I won't be mentioning any names, although all the names of the players that piloted these decks are within the description box below. Just before we kick things off, this is just a quick mention that this video will be included in an article on the Pro Pokemon website. If you'd like to check it out along with other articles to help you further your game, be sure to check out the website at www.propokemon.com. The link is in the description box below. And so with that said, let's get straight into it. Number 8. In 8th place we have Toad MANECTRIC CROBAT. This deck is a really unique concept in that while leading with Seismitoad as your main attacker, you also have CROBATs, which through evolving into Golbat and CROBAT, you're able to use their abilities, putting 2 and 3 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon. With that, you also have the Laser Verbank combo, as well as a really interesting card that was included in Rock Guard. Through multiple ways of putting this puzzle together, you're able to keep your opponent at bay with Quaking Punch, in item locking them while building up damage in the process through your Crobats and laser damage. The deck also features MANECTRIC EX, which acts as a secondary attacker in the deck. With Assault Laser, you're able to hit a solid 60 damage and even hit another 60 more if the defending Pokemon has a tool attached. When you consider how popular Spirit Links are, as well as Muscle Band, it's quite likely that you're going to be hitting 120 when attacking with MANECTRIC EX. What's even more clever is that you also run Headringers, which can be attached to the defending Pokemon to then deal more damage in the process. It's a really well thought out deck and definitely deserves its place in the top 8. Finally, here's the list if you are interested in testing it out yourself. The deck also features Shaymin EX as well as Super Scoop Ups to bounce all your Shaymin as well as your Bat line. A personal favourite of mine from the tournament. Number 7. At 7th place we have Metal Rayquaza. Rayquaza isn't a deck that should come of surprise to many of you, but what makes this deck more interesting is that it utilises a metal engine. The deck itself runs Bronzong, which allows you to use its ability, Metal Links, to put a basic metal from your discard pile onto one of your bench Pokemon, creating great synergy with Rayquaza EX. Having Bronzong and utilizing metal energy opens up the possibility of using more metal Pokemon. For example, Aegislash and Empoleon EX become obvious targets as they both fare really well with the current meta. Keeping on the theme of metal Pokemon, you also have the added inclusion of Battle Compressor, which enables you to throw your metal energy into the discard pile ready to use Metal Links, while also deck thinning in the process. And so here is the list that was used. Kecleon serves as a great counter to Seismitoad and Mewtwo EX, while Keldeo gives your Pokemon the ability to retreat for free if it has a Floatstone attached. It should be noted that there are 4 Skyfields and no Steel Shelter, as this deck aims to maximize the bench space to attack with Rayquaza. It's definitely a deck worth trying out, and if you are interested in playing Mega Rayquaza, then I would strongly advise testing a list similar to this one. Number 6. At 6th place we have another wacky deck that no one would have predicted to show up at Nationals, and that is Hippowdon. Hippowdon's strength lies in its first attack resistance desert, in that it prevents all effects of attacks including damage done to your Hippowdon by your opponent's EX Pokemon during their next turn. By using this attack every turn, it forces your opponent to find alternative ways of attacking your Hippowdons. And thanks to Furious Fist, fighting Pokemon receive quite a bit of support, which makes Hippowdon a great deck choice. Some of those include Korrina and Strong Energy, which helps you feed out your fighting Pokemon much faster and increases the damage done through attacking. The list does also include some other Pokemon to support Hippowdon, such as Landorus, Seismitoad and the one Shaymin EX, and interestingly chooses to run a combination of Silent Lab and Verbank City Gym in exchange to Fighting Stadium. And so finally, here is the list that was used on the day. As you can see, the deck is very standard and focuses primarily on supporting Hippowdon. It's an extremely simple yet surprising concept, as no one expected it to feature, and with that said, full credit to the players who came up with the idea. Number 5. At 5th place we have KLINKLANG. This is a deck that I predicted that could have featured, but wasn't sure if it was going to be competitive enough to make an impact on the higher end of the tables. Like Metal Rayquaza, it uses Bronzong to fuel for energy acceleration for your big metal hitters. Where this deck differs is that it does have the added inclusion of Plasma Clang, which when set up, prevents all damage done to your metal Pokemon by your opponent's EX Pokemon. With that said, the deck also features 3 Aegis/EXs, which prevents all damage done to Aegis Slash by Pokemon that have a special energy attached to them. This effectively locks down a lot of the options that your opponent has to attack you with, as even a lot of the non-EX Pokemon in the format also use special energy. One thing that this deck does suffer with a lot is Garbodor, as Garbodor switches off all of those abilities and can hurt this deck a lot. It's a really unique concept and a great idea, so with all that said, here is the list. Interestingly, the deck doesn't run any battle compressors and also chooses to run Skyfield over Steel Shelter. It also has a thicker line of Clang and only one rare candy, to avoid not being able to set up while dealing with item lock. It's a deck that I really like a lot, although as mentioned previously, it can have a hard time with Garbodor. Certainly one worth testing regardless. Number 4. At number 4 and coming in at 4th place, we have another metal deck. Where this deck differs from the other Bronzong decks is that it also has alternative attackers in Mewtwo and Seismitoad EX. Other than that, there is not really too much to say about the deck. The deck's major focus is on consistency and how well you're able to set up your Bronzongs to fuel for your metal attackers such as Aegislash, Cobalion and Dialga EX. With all that said, here is the list. This deck does run Steel Shelter in an attempt to prevent your metal Pokemon from being hit by special conditions, Hypnotoxic Laser being the obvious target, while also giving you a counter stadium in the process. Other things worth noting is that this deck does run 2 battle compressors and a single edition of Kecleon, which helps against opposing Seismitoads and Mewtwo EXs. A very consistent and well thought out deck to say the least. Number 3. At number 3 comes what turns out to be a very good metagame call, and that is MANECTRIC Garbodor Empoleon. The concept of the deck is extremely simple, yet very well thought out again. It relies on MANECTRIC, which utilizes basic energy so that you can Turbo Bolt, charging up alternative attackers in the process. Having basic energy means you're not in any way susceptible to cards like Enhanced Hammer or Xerosic, to name a few. Alongside that, you also have Garbodor, which blocks off all abilities in play. This deck also includes Empoleon, which should you decide to use it, acts as not only a great form of drawing more cards, but also a counter to Landorus EX, as Landorus does also have water weakness. Discarding energy with this deck is never an issue, as you're able to simply Turbo Bolt them back onto your Pokemon, so it only makes sense to utilize cards like Max Potion, as a drawback doesn't really affect you too much. That said, you also have a great counter in Rough Seas to your opponent's stadiums, while healing damage in the process. With all that said, here is the list. The battle compressors in the deck do allow you to make the most of an early Turbo Bolt, while also maintaining a strong field presence in the process. It can also be used for getting Empoleon into the discard pile if you're able to Archies early enough. If you are playing in this format at any point, it's definitely a deck worth testing at the very least. Number 2. Coming in at number 2 and in second place comes a deck that no one expected to come up against and pretty much ended up defining the whole weekend, and that deck is Wailord EX. This deck is a really unique and well thought out idea in that the whole deck is simply designed to deck your opponent out. Wailord has a massive 250 HP, which is extremely tough to take down, especially given the amount of support it runs to keep your Wailords alive. The deck runs cards such as Cassius, AZ and Max Potion and simply just aims to keep passing turn, to the point where your opponent simply doesn't have enough resources to continue attacking with. That said, you also run disruption cards such as Enhanced Hammer, Team Flare's Grunt and Xerosic to help keep your opponent's resources relatively limited. The only other Pokemon that this deck includes is Suicune, strictly for its Safeguard ability, and that it can utilize the uses of Rough Seas to recover damage. And so here is the list of this crazy deck that was used. Hard Charm was put into the deck to limit the amount of damage done to your Wailords. And with Megaphone not seeing too much play, it forces your opponent to have to use Xerosic if they want to get rid of it, but even then, you still have 3 more copies in the deck. I think most of us, including myself, would have laughed if someone told us prior to the event that Wailord was going to be popular and making it all the way to the finals. However, the deck is extremely well thought out and a lot of credit is deserved to the players who were able to put all this together. Can Wailord make an impact further down the line? We'll have to wait and find out. Number 1. And so finally at number 1 and finishing all the way at the top is the ever reliable Seismitoad. This Seismitoad deck was paired with Garbodor and that it pretty much aims to shut down not only your item cards but also all the abilities as well. When you keep in mind that you can't use Megaphone during item lock, it really leaves Xerosic or Lysander as your only outs to getting around Garbodor. With that said, you also run a single copy of Shadow Triad, which effectively turns all of your VS Seekers into a Hypnotoxic Laser should you need to recover them. The other factor is now that Trump Card is out of the format, there is the added inclusion of basic Water Energy, which allows you to continue attacking should your double colorless energies get discarded. It also opens up the possibility of playing Grenade Hammer should you need to. And with that said, here is the list. Even though that the deck doesn't have any way to recover them, it also does run a line of Crushing Hammers, one Enhanced Hammer and Head Ringers to slow your opponent down, while also using Quaking Punch in the process. A lot of players suspected that this deck might not have been viable without Trump Card in the format, however, in the end this deck was carefully tested, established and played correctly, which is what led it to win the tournament overall. And so there you pretty much have it. That is the top 8 decks to feature at this year's US National Championships. If you would like to see more Pokemon related content, all you have to do is click the annotations at the end of this video, and if you would like to subscribe to the channel, there will also be a subscribe button there as well. Alternatively, be sure to check out propokemon.com. This video will be included with an article, so if you'd like to check that out, the link is in the description box below. Thanks very much for watching and I will see you all next time.